Hi guys, it's great to see you again. It's Let's Talk here with Paul Stafford, and one of the things that I often feel about in our industry is that really when we create collections and we're creating shows and we're doing things, what you really want to do is do something that leaves a long-lasting memory in people's minds. Something that when people look at the image, that it impacts on them emotionally or creatively or in an inspiring way. It's very, very difficult to actually create looks and to do things that haven't been done before. In fact, it's nearly impossible. And actually, one of the things that we tend to do is we always tend to go back and look for inspiration in the past so that we can push something forward or try to do something new. In the last 5 to 6 years, one of the people who I feel has done that brilliantly and is way ahead of the crest in terms of pushing boundaries and really creating new ideas and interesting looks is Tom Connell. Tom is, for me, somebody who has just got that really brilliant balance of being able to get the combination of beauty, artistry and technique and putting it all together in ways that make it very, very exciting and interesting. So, for me, whenever I see one of Tom's looks, I instantly recognize it because he's got that trademark look of somebody who has really captured a brand or a style of his own. We're really, really happy to have Tom Connell with us tonight on Let's Talk. And before we get Tom on, let me give you a little bit of a background in what I know about him. Obviously, what everyone's aware of is the fact that he's the new creative director at Davines. But before that, he was the artistic director at Trevor Sorbet, and that's an incredible hotbed of talent from the last 30 years. You think of the people who've come from Trevor Sorbet, from Vivian McKinder right through to Eugene Solomon, the Brooks guys, and then you've got Angelo Seminara. The list goes on and on. And of course, Tom was the latest in a long line of brilliant people who took on that mantle. And for me, and I know Tom's joined us, he actually recaptured an essence of Trevor Sorbet that inspired us again. He brought Trevor's brand and made it fresh and new. And I remember seeing Trevor's comeback show a few years ago at Salon International, and it was mind-blowing just seeing this legend of our time being reinvented in a way that made him exciting and interesting and brought the brand to a whole new generation. How did that feel, Tom, to think that that was your job? How's that for a start?
How did it feel?
Yeah.
A lot of pressure. It felt like, you look at something like Trevor Sorbet, and I first came aware of him when my dad took me to watch him when I was 16. So I held him and still do in such high esteem. So yeah, to have that on your shoulders, that it's like, the art team and the company creatively have been out of the spotlight for a certain amount of time. So this was back in it, and it had to be right, especially with Trevor coming on stage with us. So yeah, there was a lot of pressure, but he instills like a really good process in preparing a show. So by the time the show day comes, it should be easy really, because you've done the hard work. So yeah, it was. There's a few sleepless nights though.
Well, we'll come back to the Trevor Sorbet legacy in a while, because obviously I did speak to you earlier just about just the impact that you had when you became art director, but it was the long line of amazing people, Antoinette Benders. I mean, every time I think of Trevor Sorbet, I think of another name, but we're going to come back to that. Because you come from a hairdressing family.
Yeah. Grew up in a salon from as early as I can remember. Really, my parents had a salon, so I was running around from. Just feels like home, the smell of colour and perm and bleach, and it feels like a very like nostalgic smell being in a salon. So yeah, from my whole life, my dad was very, very passionate hairdresser, and still is. He's retired now, but he's the one that really, really got me into it.
Yeah. And did you go into it from an early age, or did you want to do something else and then?
I wanted to do like graphic design when I was at school, and I had a really rubbish art teacher who was probably the most like least encouraging person you can imagine. So she really it took me away from that for a little bit, and I didn't want to be in her class, and she wasn't so encouraging. And then I started at my dad's salon just for a bit of extra cash, really. I think I wanted a pair of trainers or something, and he said, well, if you want a pair of trainers, you need to come working in the salon on a Saturday. And that's just how I got into it. But it was only when he took me to watch the hair show with Trevor that I really understood there was another aspect of the industry as well.
And what was Wigan like back in those days? What type of environment was it in terms of, you know, the hairdressing scene? Was there much going on, or did you have to stick to
there was really. There was a big salon and training school called Norman and Phillips, where I did my MVQ, or part of my MVQ. And then my dad had a big salon in Wigan, and you always have one of those main salons that train all of the best hairdressers, and they go off and open salons. That was probably my dad. So he had that huge salon, really beautiful space. Would have looked kind of still pretty modern now. And him and my mum had it together, and he trained a lot of hairdressers. So there's tend to be this big hair community. In fact, I went back 18 months ago, and I did a charity hair show in Wigan for a friend of mine that had passed away, and we did a charity hair show for the mental health charity Mind, and it was unbelievable to see. There's about a couple of hundred people there, all hairdressers from the Wigan area that knew each other, that trained with my dad, and so there's this kind of a real small community there.
And how long did you work for your father for?
Like on a Saturday from being about 13, and then when I left school, I left when I was about 17. I did about a year and a half, and he could see I was really into it, and he didn't want me to kind of be like not a big fish in a little pond, but he wanted me to broaden my horizon. So we saw that Andrew Collins was opening a salon in Selfridges in the Trafford Centre, which is like a big shopping centre in Manchester. And he said, you should go there and try and get a job as an assistant, because Andrew has an art team, you'll learn about going on shoots and things like that. So that's why I left there.
And what was the leap, what was the step up like from working as a Saturday boy with your dad to working with, you know, an icon like Andrew Collins? Were you prepared for it?
It was a bit easier work-wise because my dad was a bloody nightmare. It's one of those things, you know, when you're the boss's son, you've got to almost work twice as hard to be taken seriously. So going to, you know, in my dad's salon, it was like, he was one of those guys, you know, in my day, we used to clean the skirting boards with a toothbrush, so there was no breaks or set structure, it was just you went through the door and you just worked. We're going to Andrew Collins, there was like a real set training structure. You got set breaks, you got a break in the morning and lunch in the afternoon, which was like, I'd never had before. So I was like, oh, it's all right, this Manchester city centre salon working, it's a bit more structured. But then obviously the training was, I really had to like knuckle down. It wasn't just the odd blow dry after work on a training night, it was like a real structured training system at Andrews.
And during that time, was the ambition still to go to London? Was London the dream?
Yeah, always. From when I watched Trevor on stage when I was 16, I was like, I want to go and do that, and I want to go and do it working for him. So I knew how hard it was going to be to get a job there, because I'd read in a magazine about the vardering process that Trevor has, and how you have to do 5 models, and then you have to do 5 weeks training, and then you have to present 11 models to Trevor, and he's marked every test in over 40 years. So I knew that was going to be difficult. So I didn't go for it until I felt like I could pass it.
Yeah. And explain to me or to everyone, what was that like, having to actually do work in front of Trevor Sorbie at that stage? I mean, that must be, it's like going to sing in front of Elvis Presley.
Yeah. It was nerve-wracking. It was very. I remember once during my vardering, I was doing a firefly, and I'd done half of it, and I was like, okay, right, that's looking all right. I feel like that's looking good. And Tiziana, who's the head of education, she came to check in. She's like, yeah, it looks good. And then for the other half, he arrived in the salon and came over and was like, oh, I've not met you before. And when Trevor starts chatting, he likes to chat quite a lot, and he basically stood at the side of me talking while I cut the entire side of this firefly. And yeah, my hands were like shaking and shaking. I'm sure the firefly ended up like well, asymmetric, but
Call that a wedge, so that would be all right.
yeah, just brush it back.
And you passed. You got the job.
I got the job. I failed my first trade test, and then I went back away for a year, worked a bit harder, worked on my skills, and then I went back and passed the second term.
And were you aware of the legacy of Trevor Sorbo? Obviously, you'd seen him live, but were you aware of the legacy, just the sheer scale and the level of people who had come before you, or was that not something you were focused on at that time?
I was aware of Trevor's legacy and the scale of Trevor because he's one of my dad's heroes. So I always say when most dads were telling their kids about George Best and Pele, my dad was telling me about Trevor Sorby and Roger Thompson and people like that. So I've been kind of indoctrinated into the cult of hairdressing very early on. So I knew Trevor and I knew how high esteem my dad held him and how I held him. But I didn't really know about the other people. I didn't know about Antoinettes and Eugenes and people like that at this point.
I mean, just as from my own perspective, whenever I was a young hairdresser, I worked in a salon called Company Haircutters, and we got the opportunity to do a show with Trevor Sorby in the mid-'80s. Mm-hmm. And we thought we were great hairdressers until we seen Trevor up close. And I just became a plumber. That was the impact he had on me. But at that time, he had people around him like Antoinette and some amazing hairdressers. I think that one of the things that always inspires me about Trevor Sorby, and I spoke to you about this earlier, is that the people who leave him, they go on to become great people themselves. No one ever leaves Trevor and doesn't fly. You know, if you think about you guys, you, Sally Brooks, Eugene Solomon, Keith Harris, all those guys, he seems to empower people with the ability to believe in themselves. Is that the case?
Yeah, I think it is. I think that the reason, when we spoke before and you mentioned that, I was thinking about it over the last hour. And I think the reason is probably twofold. The first one is that he's very sure of himself, so he doesn't mind putting people on a pedestal, on a platform, because he's Trevor Sorby and he knows that. So there's no reason for him to feel insecure. So if he sees something in somebody, he pushes them up. Yeah. So he gives them all the shine and all the light, and he'll take you on stage and say nice things about you, which obviously then it gives you exposure in the industry. And I think the second reason is because Trevor worked at Sassoon's, so he brings that to the table. And then he was at John Frieda where he learned about session and dressing hair. And he was at Tony and Guy for a spell where he's texturizing and he's razoring, he's slicing. And then he did a lot of editorial and photography work. So the Trevor Sorby way of doing it is this like alloy of all of those things. So he teaches people how to dress hair and how to blow dry hair with a round brush, but then he also teaches you how to cut a graduated bob and a firefly the way that Sassoon's did it. And so I feel like whoever leaves isn't boxed into any avenue. They have like a whole array of skills. So I think that probably plays a part in it as well.
Well, that's actually the thing I wanted to come to, because I think that's the most interesting. Every single one of those people, and you included, has their own style, and their own style is identifiable. Yeah. I think the thing that, for me, the first haircut that really struck me that you did, that really had me watching and looking at what you were doing next, was a collection you called Unified. That was because that was the first time in a long time I'd seen someone who'd taken a series of haircuts, technical shapes, and made them do something brand new and interesting. And I remember showing the team in the salon and saying, "Now this is exciting." How did that come about? How did Unified come about?
I suppose that was my first collection that I did as the art director. So I really wanted to make like a statement with it, that it was something in a total left turn from what the art team had done previous. And I looked around at the time of what was, say, popular in hairdressing, and I didn't really like the type of photography, the kind of very digitalized, very edited thing. It didn't really do anything for me. And I thought, if we want to make a statement and plant the flag of the art team back, we should do something the other way. So we shot it all outside in natural sunlight. Really, no post editing or retouching. A little bit of skin work, but that was it. And then it was a case of I said to the team, just don't bring anything to the table that you've seen before. Like if you're going to bring something to the table, half of us should not like it. When you put something down, half of us should go, well, that's a bit much, and then the other half have to convince us. Because if we all say, yeah, that's good, then we've probably seen it before. And I think any like new idea, you should always be a little bit like, maybe that's a bit too far. So Trevor and myself really pushed the team, and I pushed myself to. And another thing we did with that was we said, don't worry about it having to be teachable. Don't worry about having to be able to recreate it on stage. Just worry about making something that's going to blow people away from an image point of view. Because I think sometimes if you do something for something, then it puts like a fence around your idea. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So because then you go, oh no, I can't do that because I won't be able to teach it on stage, or I can't do that because that's not really educational. Well, then you may have like closed off an avenue that was quite interesting. So those things combined all added up to what Unified was really. And it, you know what, as well, because it was the first thing that we'd done for ages, the budget was like that. And a funny story from the shoot day, we were lied to by the studio. So we wanted to shoot outside, so we got a studio that was had an outside car park, so we could shoot in the sunlight. And the studio had lied to us. They took our money, and when we started to use the car park, the security guys came over and said, you can't use this car park, this is private property. And we're like, well, the studio said, and bear in mind, we had all the models, all the kit, the photography set up, all the A-frames and everything. And the security was like, no, you've got to move. So we're like, what are we going to... So then we all had to jump in an Uber, and we actually went to one of our team, then was called James. We went to his back garden and set up in the back garden, and his neighbour, who he shares the garden with, there was a paddling pool for his neighbour's kid, and we couldn't move it. Have you ever tried to move a full paddling pool? It's so heavy, the water in it. So the photographer had to take his shoes and socks off and stand in the paddling pool to photograph the looks to get the right distance from the model. So it was a stressful day, but all that kind of calamity, it didn't seem to matter at the end because it was just the ideas were strong enough.
Do you know, one of the things that I really loved about it, Tom, and I have to tell you, I'm a judge at the British Hairdressing Awards, and the amount of times I've seen the geometric knots being copied that year was phenomenal. And I remember a lot of us were looking at going, yeah, but Tom did that first. And also the back sweep was, for me, one of the most beautiful things I've seen in the last 10 years. Now, I did say earlier, I'm not going to be, just complimenting night. But those are things that I think probably when your career is over, you'll look back at, and everyone else will look back and go, there were landmark periods in your time where your work was definitive. Does it feel like that already?
It feels like certainly that the back sweep one is the thing that I'll like hold all the other ideas up against and go like, because that it was just because it was so hard to do, and there was so many times that I just wanted to stick a weft in a graduated haircut. Yeah. Because I practiced it and it couldn't, and I kept having this thing in my head which was like, if you think about it from like, if you was like a carpenter or a sculptor, anyone can glue two pieces of wood together, but can someone carve a shape out of one piece of wood? And that was in my head. You don't use a wig, don't use weft, do it on real hair, because the trick will be that it is real hair. Does that make sense? What I was hoping is that when people looked at it, they would try and figure out how I got the weft in, and obviously the trick was that it was real hair. So yeah, I think certainly for me that one is the one that I look back and enjoy the most.
And you also have fun with the past. That's the thing that I like. I like your interpretation of things like flat tops. I love the way you deconstruct them and add little aspects to them and style them and dress them in ways that make them interesting. But they really do go back to a more traditional kind of heritage of haircut. Is that something you continually do?
Yeah, I think so. I always think like a good image should have like a combination of nostalgia and newness.
Mm.
Like it should look like, oh, that kind of looks like something I've seen before, but at the same time, I've never seen anything like it. And if you can get those two things together, then you're onto something. So a lot of times I will look at, okay, that's a classic for a reason, and a classic becomes a classic because it's stood the test of time. So let's look at how I can innovate that and kind of prod it and poke it and do something different that. And you can be in the studio and you can think, that's not working, that's not working, don't move, that looks right. And not much has changed, but something's just, you've moved that classic in a way that just feels right, you know.
Yeah. But you brought a really nice essence of dressing her into things that normally would have been blow dried quite rigid or quite, graphic. And you've made things much more editorial. Where does that editorial influence come from? Is it a natural thing, or do you look for an editorial version of every haircut you do?
Um, I always just like to, not like, I always believe that you get like one hard thing in a not even just in an image on a head. So if I'm doing like a haircut that's strong, then everything else needs to be soft. So that you'll never really see me do like a strong cut that's a really strong color, or vice versa, because I think it all then becomes a bit overkill. So if I've done a strong cut, I normally just shoot some water, and just before I go on set, I'll just do a mist of it, and it just lets the hair like, just like relax. And I feel like in my mind, I feel like it goes from being my hair back to the model's hair.
Yeah.
Just kind of fits a little bit. So yeah, I think if you can do the strong shape, but then just pull back a little bit and let it like go back a few steps, then it always, to me, feels a little bit more, a bit more relevant.
Yeah. I mean, I think the thing that's really been interesting about your work over the last 4 or 5 years is that it really isn't industry type hair. Is that fair? It's not, it looks to me like sort of hair that you might see in the beauty pages of Elle or Marie Claire or something. It's something that's very beautiful and aesthetic and ethereal. And, it's got a very kind of soft but edgy feel to it. Was that a kind of a guidance from Trevor Sorbet and the team, or was that just something you felt?
A bit of both, I think. I think certainly from Trevor, he always is a big believer in doing something strong and doing something new, but doing it in a beautiful way. So I think that influence, that's probably the biggest thing that I took from him. But for me personally, I put like a lot of layers into the work. So if I create a look, I'll write like a script of who I think would wear this, what clothes would she or he wear, what music would they be into, where they might work, and it helps me create this mental image of a character in my head. So then if I'm casting with an agency or I'm walking around the street trying to street cast, it gives, I've got the picture of the person I want to get in my head. So then I'm just trying to find someone that looks as close to that as possible. So then when I do that, it all seems a bit more believable and feels more like a real character rather than I've just gone, you're having that haircut, and I'm just sticking that haircut on anyone's head just because she'll have it. I think there's a big difference between someone just saying yes to a haircut because it's a model and she wants a job, other than she's actually going to work on her and work beyond the bone structure. It might look good on her because she's got a nice face, but does it suit her as a person? And I think you can tell the difference.
Yeah, I get that. And I think that's something that's very evident within your work as well. You can see that there's personality and it's about the person. Because I think hairdressers, we as hairdressers are very inclined to let the haircut rule our head. It's all about the cut. And eventually when you've done it, it could be technically brilliant, but actually it says nothing about the person wearing it. Whereas with a lot of your freer stuff, particularly, the kind of looser, much more kind of soft, feminine, sexier stuff, you can tell that the person who's wearing it's enjoying wearing it, which is a great testament to you, of course. Moving on, when you're putting collections together, because I read these little things on your Instagram page, you dig quite deep into the inspiration behind it, whether it's a song or a film. I mean, for me personally, looking at your work, it's kind of hard to see your influence. It all looks very, very natural and very much you. Where do you dig for all this stuff?
I think another thing from Trevor is that he has a saying where he says you should always have your like a little antenna up, where you never totally switched off. It could be on a day off, could be on holiday. You're always got like your periphery looking for things. And if I ever see anything, and it could be in a magazine, it could be on Instagram, it could be a joke that I might use in a show, it could be a piece of lighting that I'll see in a shop. There's nothing that I can't think that I wouldn't use. And I just make a note of it, I might write it down, I might take a photograph of it, and it all goes into a big file. And about once a month, I'll sit down and go through that file, and inevitably, your mind has picked up on similar things just because of where your headspace is. So there normally is like a red thread going through all of those references, and so then I'll spend a week just trying to make sense of them and go, okay, why did I notice that? Why did that song stand out enough for me to write it down? Or why did that album cover that I saw make me think of that shoot that I saw in Vogue 2 years ago, or something like that? And then it's almost like a bit of a puzzle. So then I put it all up on a wall, and it looks a bit like one of those FBI murder serial killer walls where they're trying to deconstruct something, and then I'll just look at it all, and then inevitably, well, hopefully, there's an idea in there, and then once there's an idea in there, I'll start exploring that, and that normally leads into a full collection.
And when you were the head of the art team and the creative director, did Trevor just give you full freedom? Did he ever step in here? Listen, Tom, that looks shit. We're not going. We're not.
He gives you full freedom, but then I think that's the good thing about what you said earlier, is that you've got Angelo, from Eugene to Sally to myself, all the work couldn't be more different. And I think that's a testament to Trevor, that he doesn't try and make you him. He wants to make you like the best version of you. But he knows good taste and bad taste as well. So then if you do something that's boring or is seen before, he'll tell you. Or if you think something just isn't the right standard, he'll tell you that as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's a tough job, isn't it? I mean, I think one of the things you just hit there that struck me as important is it's the taste boundaries within our industry. And Trevor's work has always had that absolute taste level perfect. You know, that must be one of the characters or one of the cultures of the company, about getting that balance between stuff that's interesting and exciting and innovative, but also tasteful, because we can't be inclined to go the other way in our industry.
Yeah, that is the hardest thing. You know, you can come up with something new is pretty easy, but coming up with something new that looks beautiful is very difficult. And
was that something you had to learn, or was it something that you kind of brought with you naturally?
I think, yeah, you can definitely develop that. I do think you have to have something where you have like innovative ideas. But yeah, the taste thing, when I look at some of the early ones, obviously that was, you could see that it's my work, but it's the taste thing wasn't there. I was trying to throw the kitchen sink at it. But I think then the only way to get from there to where you want to be is just to do as many things as you can and make as many mistakes, and then keep hopefully improving each time that you do it.
Yeah, I mean, I think when I was reading the influences to some of your work, and you talked about the headbands that John McEnroe and Bjorn Borg, you know, there's an element of that is, are you sort of taking the piss? Is that kind of like, are you saying that to sort of just, because it's a little bit like Mark Hayes putting lobsters on people's heads. Is it just, is it just done to wind people up, or actually is this genuine?
Yeah, so that came from a massive influence of mine is Bruce Springsteen, about his approach to his writing, certainly his early albums. And there's a documentary, The Making of Darkness on the Edge of Town, and he talks about in that of his file of ideas, of his notebook of all his lines and his lyrics, and he calls it a junkyard. And he said that you sometimes have half of a song that doesn't work and half of a song that doesn't work, but then you put them together and you have a song that works. And that's what happened with that idea. I'd seen the Bjorn Borg and McEnroe picture, and that had been in my file for ages, and I thought, that's cool, the way the headband separates the haircut. but I can't really do anything with that. And what do I do with it? And I cut the band on a mannequin head, and I was like, well, and what am I going to do with the top bit? But then, if, say 6 months later-ish, I'd been looking at all the samurai top knots and the sumo wrestlers, and so. But I was like, well, that's a little bit of a pastiche. I can't just do like a samurai top knot because it needs something else. And I watched the documentary with Springsteen when he talked about the junkyard, and then I started thinking, okay, maybe. So I went through the file and looked at any half ideas that I had, and looked at if I could put them together, and that's where that came from.
Yeah, I mean, it's a beautiful image, and when I was reading the kind of narrative behind it, I could sort of get it, but actually, it's the image that's beautiful. That's just such a great look. When I went to the Trevor Sorbie comeback show at Salon International, the thing that I was most excited by was the look inspired by Jackson Pollock. Oh, yeah. And the reason that I loved this, first of all, I'm a huge Jackson Pollock fan, but the other reason was that I actually thought it was one of the interesting combinations of cut and color. And it shouldn't have worked, but it works beautifully.
Yeah.
Can you give us a little bit of a background and how that came together?
So that was done by Tiziana, who's the head of education, and she's a real hard worker, and she'd been coming with ideas for the shoot, and she just brought in a weft of, and I'd seen it before, I think TG did it years ago where they were flicking paintbrushes and stuff like that. But she literally did it like the Jackson Pollock thing. She watched the documentary and she looked at the way that if the paint is heavy on the brush and you do it, you're going to get thicker, heavier consistency going to finer dots. And then she just brought the weft in, and we all looked at it and we were like, oh shit, that's good. And that started off as kind of one messy weft. And then she kept working on it. So then I think she had the long one and then she had the short one as well, didn't she?
And it looked great live. It was a great,
yeah, it's visual, isn't it?
Yeah, it was one of those great impact of the show. I mean, that particular show, I remember when I was watching you and Trevor, because you filmed coming through the back into the front, and you looked like the seasoned showman, very cool, calm, relaxed, and Trevor looked like he'd literally, was about to fall. He looked so nervous.
Yeah, it just means so much to him, and he speaks openly about it. He's suffered with anxiety and things like that, especially when it comes to doing big shows. And it was a big moment for him. I think it's what it's like, Paul. You got to be match fit, haven't you? And yeah. I've done that previous month. I've probably been on stage 5 times, and Trevor, he hadn't been on stage for 10 years. So it was a case of, and obviously the expectation when you Trevor, people are expecting something as well. So it was, I forgot about that video where we were walking through the corridor. That ripped off Richard Ashcroft's music video. I watched that and I was like,
really set the scene for what was it? I mean, when you heard the reception he got when he walked out on stage, did that make you realize just the scale of who it was you were working with?
Yeah, well, at first we were like, when we came up on the screen and people started cheering, I was like, oh, great. And then I looked around and I was like, oh, it's for him, innit? It's for me. I was getting carried away. I was like, I think it's for this guy stood next to me. But yeah, it was definitely a great moment to see all that thing that goes from your file to your wall to a mannequin head to a model to a rehearsal studio to on stage. It's a cool process to do.
So what was your role as art director, Travis? I mean, what did you have control of? Was it everything creatively, including the training, the education, the campaigns?
So the education is run by Tiziana, who did the Jackson Pollock, and then everything else from my side was the creative direction of the art team. So all the shows, seminars, and photo shoots. But then also like the creative direction of the salons, so from how the salon should look and feel, to the music that's playing, the teaspoons that the client stirs the coffee with. All that matters, as you know, you're a salon owner, all that adds to the vibe, doesn't it?
Yeah, I've no say in the music in our salon. They don't want to... So when you're in the middle of all this, are you aware that you are suddenly becoming a profile yourself? All of a sudden, you're the person people are focusing in, and they're, you know, it's, I won't say it's less about Trevor, but it's more about you, and people are coming to see you. They want to see what you're doing. Are you aware of that, or are you just doing your job?
Uh, I was just doing the job, but it's Trevor that kept saying that. He was like, right, you know, because he's seen it before, hasn't he? It's the first time I was seeing anything, so he was, you know, almost like coaching you, you know, going out for a coffee each week and, right, you need to do this, and what are you thinking about this? And, you know, you've got to, you've just got to just keep, how can I say, like, you've just got to keep improving, you know what I mean? You can't, there's no resting on your laurels, or you don't want to be like a flash in the pan, if you know what I mean? So
Just like having Alex Ferguson sitting in the background saying, "You're all right, kid. You're fine. You can do this."
Yeah. So you've just got to just knuckle down with it and think, yeah, you might have done one good shoot, but the people that have gone before you did 5 good shoots, 10 good shoots. They had, you know, a great decade. How are you going to be able to consistently do it? That's the key.
So from around 2016, your work and the level of work that you were putting out was coming out very regularly, because you weren't really doing campaigns or collections as such. You were dropping 3 or 4 shots at a time. That became a bit of a thing you were doing. I loved the way you just dropped 4 images or 2 images. And what inspired that? Was it just not to do the usual, or was it just doing things as you felt it?
I bought a camera.
Right.
I wanted to do more shoots. I had a lot of ideas, and obviously, as you know, there's certain financial restraints when you're working with a photographer that's charging 10 grand, 5 grand, whatever it may be. That means that you can do a lot of shoots a lot less than what you would like. So I bought a camera and I just set out doing test shoots, and when I felt that the photography was decent enough, I just started putting images out. You know, and so whenever I put work out was whenever I'd just do a test, and if I didn't like it, I'd throw it all away, and if I liked it, I'd maybe get, you know, do an edit on 2 images and then put them out and just keep doing it like that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it changed the way a lot of people have thought about doing shoots. I know for me personally, that I started to think, you know, I don't really want to do collections anymore. I just want to put stuff out when I've done it. You know,
Yeah.
And instead of just putting it out on Instagram, I'm actually having a photographer around the salon who can just capture it and put it out raw. I love that. But you're very lucky, because not only are you reasonably talented, but you're in London, so you've got it all on your doorstep. How good has London been for you?
Yeah, it's been great. It's been great. I moved here in 2009, and just the opportunity to meet people from photographers to, you know, you might have an idea and you can go to St. Martin's College and just walk around and you'll see some cool girl that's gonna have the haircut. There just seems like there's a lot of great opportunities, and you're gonna meet from a set designer for a show through to a photographer through to a camera guy, whoever it is. There's just a lot of there's a lot of possibility. If you know what I mean. There's nothing can't happen, which is a nice.
And you strike me as being
feeling.
quite a laid-back guy. I mean, for all this great work that's out there and this already brilliant portfolio of stuff, I don't hear you making any great, you know, statements or any, you know, grand gestures. It's all very withdrawn and laid back and easygoing, and you let the work do the talking. Has London done that to you, or is that just the way you are naturally?
I think it's just the way I am naturally. Really, I think you should be known for your work, not your personality. In my opinion, I think, you know, that's the way I've looked at it, really, and also the people that I admire outside of hairdressing. So my favourite directors, my favourite musicians, they put out a film or an album when it's ready, like you just said. They don't put, you know, and when in between, they shut up and they work on what the next album's going to be. You know, I don't know what Tarantino's doing now after Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, but he's probably writing a new script, and you might not hear from him for 4 years until that film's ready to be released. And I think that's a nice way to work, or certainly a way that I like to work.
Yeah, I mean, it's very refreshing in our industry, because when people get to a certain level, in our industry, they're often inclined to have views on the industry as opposed to the craft. And you seem to withdraw from that. It's purely about the craft, which is kind of unusual when people get to your level of profile. And it's great, but it seems to be a conscientious, or at least it appears to be a conscientious thing.
Yeah, I try and not get, and you've probably seen it during lockdown. There's a lots of opinions flying around on who's doing lives and who's not, and I just tend to I always think you shouldn't comment on what someone else is doing, because you never know that person's situation, do you? And certainly never comment on someone's work, because they might not have been fortunate enough to have certain training or met certain people or had good mentors. You don't know someone's situation, so to say, oh, I don't think this is good, or I don't think someone should be doing this. You don't know all the other aspects that's making them do that thing. So it's probably just best to not say anything. And as far as like being out there as a personality rather than the hair, I think I saw a good interview with Denzel Washington, and he said, you want people to say, I can't wait to see you, not I see you everywhere. And I think that's a good lesson to live by for anyone like that.
It's brilliant, yeah. I mean, and it's actually very difficult in this world of social media to keep a profile that people associate with great stuff, as opposed to what you say or what you hear or what you do. And I think and I love that about you, and I love it about your work, because it speaks for itself. So you're with Trevor Sorbie, you're traveling all over the world. You've reinvented the image of Trevor Sorbie for the 2018, and in 2019, Davines knock on your door and say, we want to make you our global creative director, and Trevor's delighted for you, right?
Yeah. He was. He's as I said before, he's seen it before. He knows it's a natural progression. And I went over to his house. It was a long train ride to his house, I'll tell you that. I was thinking, Jesus Christ, if this train could just come off the tracks now, I won't have to get all the way there. But I went there and we had a chat, and he gave me some great advice. And he's good. I was speaking to him last week on the phone. He's as I said earlier, he's very secure in who he is. So he never gets he's never jealous, because why would he be? So he's always kind of very encouraging of what you're doing.
So what did Davines say to you that made you leave your dream job? At the end of the day, you idolized Trevor Sorbie. He was your hero. You'd literally risen to the very top. You were the man. What could Davines offer you that would take you away from band?
So it was. I always felt like if I was ever going to leave Trevor, it would have to be to set up my own thing, because I didn't think I would ever find somewhere that had the same level of authenticity until I started sitting down and speaking with Davines. And I don't know if you know much about Davide, the guy that took it over from his parents and ran with it. And it's got such a unique approach to not just its aesthetic, but also its moral and social values. And I knew a bit about it. I knew that I liked the products, but I didn't know all that aspect of it. And I'm like, this more than a bottle of shampoo or a salary at the end of the month. It means more. And then when conversations developed and I started to look at the role, and I started to obviously, you go backwards and forwards, as you know, when you're negotiating something like that. And I just wrote out what I felt like my ideal job description would be, and I sent it to them, and they said, yeah. And that means that as you probably guessed by this conversation, I'm very, very interested in finding out what's next, and what I don't know, and what's going to be the next chapter of hairdressing, what's going to be the next set of images that are going to make people think. And that's what they want from me. They want shows that are going to make people think. They want education that's going to surprise people. They want images that is going to make people stand back and not expect them. And to have that opportunity to do that for a global company was just too good to turn down.
Yeah. And so in November you took this role on, and it came as a huge shock to people outside your circle, but it seemed like a really, really good fit because of the type of work you do and the type of brand Davines is. It seemed like a great marriage. But of course, then you get hit with coronavirus just as you've just done your first collection. February or March in London. Is that right?
Yeah. We just launched
And,
it.
and of course, the Italians knew about this first. How has that changed your view of the industry moving forward now that we've literally had 10, 12 weeks of, literally no industry?
Has it changed my views?
Yeah.
I mean, I think I'm a little bit reticent to go all in on the digital education. I still think there's going to be hairdressers are social people by their nature, and I think there's still going to be a place when it's safe to do so, either when there's a vaccine or in the meantime adhering to social distancing. I still think there's going to be a huge place for having people in a room having a shared experience. Right? You can stick Spotify on, but it's not the same as going to the gig.
Yeah.
And I still think that there's going to be a massive, and I know a lot of brands are doing a huge shift, but I don't know. There's a lot of free education. We could click off Instagram now and go across that top bar, and there's probably 10 haircuts or colours you could watch tonight.
Yeah.
So I feel like there's a case for, it could eat itself before anyone starts making any money out of online things. So I think certainly on the education side, it's important to still remember that we're in a people business, and there's a communication thing. And I was speaking to Dove on the phone, Dove you had on last week, and he said something great was, you can watch Man United play football, but you're not going to know how to play football after it. I thought that's
So good.
It was a very so I think on that side of it, it's that, and I think salons, obviously, I think the public are going to really, really appreciate hairdressers much more when the salons reopen. I think they're really going to appreciate how much they need them or need us, and so I think that maybe we'll be held in a little bit more higher of esteem, which is nice.
One of the things you just touched on there, and obviously I'm great friends with Dove, but do you think there's a distinct difference between educators and art directors? Because the lines are becoming very blurred now. All of a sudden, art directors are becoming educators and educate the art direction. How do you feel about that?
I think it depends on the individual. I've seen some amazing haircutters that I wouldn't let be an art director, and I've seen some art directors that I wouldn't let teach me a graduated bob. Right. But they're great at what they do, and it's the same as salon. You see it in the salon, can't you? You might have an unbelievable technical cutter, but they're quiet, and you might have someone that you probably wouldn't ask to cut your own hair, but you can't get an appointment with them for 6 weeks because they know how to make women look beautiful, and they've got the pattern, and so I think it's down to the individual, I think.
But the thing about it is when you get to a level, and people want to see you, they really want to see, as you said, up close and personal. They want a live performance. Do you think the amount of material that's online at the moment is affecting people's idea of what it is going to a seminar or show? Do you think it's making less people want to do that because there's just so much material out there?
I think there will. Yeah, I think it will. But I think that it's the responsibility of myself and people that have the kind of good fortune to be able to go on stage and present, that you've got to be firing on all cylinders. There's no, Paul, how many times have you been to a show and watched someone just phone in a performance, and they've been a million times before and they're taking this much off the fringe, and you think that's disrespectful to that person that might have saved up for that ticket. So I think that's going to go. I think if people are going to lay the money down, they're going to want you really, really pushing it and giving them an experience that they can't get through a screen in their hand. And I think it's not, when you do like a big show or seminar, your job's not to like teach someone something, it's to remind them of something. Yeah. You know what it's like when you first get into hairdressing and you're loving it and you're hungry for knowledge. A lot of time that gets grind out of people, the day-to-day grind of getting up and going into the salon. Sometimes people lose that, and I think when you go on stage, it's your job to remind them of why they're excited about being a hairdresser, and it's your job to make them excited to go to work the next day. That's your number one job. To when you go on the stage, make them care about what you care about for that hour that you're on stage. And if you can do that, they'll want to go back to work, and they might be cutting a little old lady the next day, but they'll be better at it.
Yeah.
If you come from the right place. So I think those type of shows and seminars will still exist, but the ones that are just there to make the ticket money, I think they'll go away, which is good, I think.
So now that you're overseeing the creative out and the artistic output of Davos, how much of an impact is that going to have on your work? Do you still have that same free reign, so we'll still see those signature Tom Connell looks, or is there a little bit more pressure, not pressure, but a little bit more stress on you to create stuff that is more company orientated? You can answer that as honestly as you want.
I think that there's twofold. I'm still doing my personal collections all the time. I'm working on one based around skateboarders in the 70s in Los Angeles. Someone bought me a book called Silver Skate 70s, and it's all about there was a big drought in the 70s in Los Angeles, and all these swimming pools had no water in, so this huge skateboarding scene exploded, and the haircuts and these bleach like surfer things are just amazing. So I'm working on stuff personally for that. But from the Davines point of view, my plan is I want to like take on what I think is like probably the biggest challenge or creative challenge in hairdressing, which is for a brand to really, really produce work that filters down into the salon, that you see people going down the street. Imagine like seeing people go down the street and go, that's a Davines haircut or a Davines colour. It doesn't happen, does it? You get a bit with balayage was doing it, but probably Sassoons and then Bumble in the 90s did it to an extent, but no one else has done it since then. And that's what, from the Davines point of view, that's the challenge that I'm undertaking. And I'm gonna like properly put myself on the spot saying that, but it's that's my goal. Whether I achieve it or not, well, we'll have to see. But
yeah, I love that. I mean, and I think we'll have to give credit. Tony and Guy did it as well in the 90s.
Yeah, they did. Yeah, that because that was when I came into hairdressing, and that you're right there. Tony and Guy did it as well.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of where you're at right now, and the fact that you've got this amazing role. When I looked at the nominees for British Hairdresser of the Year this year, I really was so shocked that you weren't there.
All right, thanks. Well,
I really thought. Has that ever been an ambition? Do you think about it, or is it something that if it happens, it happens? But well, I mean, how do you feel about that?
Yeah, if it happens, it happens. Really, I've never really thought about it. I've never entered any awards. It's not something that, and I don't mean that in a derogatory way to anyone that does enter it. It's just, it's never. You know what? I fear that if I entered an award and maybe I won it or I nearly won it, the next year I might fall into that trap of that like formula, that awards formula, where then 2 years down the line I'm going, oh, I don't have a short blonde one. I'm going to have to get a short blonde one in there because, and I don't trust myself not to fall into that trap, so I don't even get into it.
I did, but again, I'm lucky enough to judge the awards. And the one thing about the British nominees, I have to admit, that's a different level when you get to that stage. And I think, your work, and that's why because I seen the amount of work that was copied a few years ago that looked like your work, I really kind of felt that time was coming. And I'm really sure. And also, you don't have to enter British. They nominate you. We nominate you.
Oh, yeah.
You don't have to send don't worry about sending the pictures in. We'll do it. We'll that sort of
if it happens, I'd be very happy. And I'm sure my dad would. He'd get a tuxedo on and come down to the Grosvenor House or wherever, wouldn't he? So.
And how does he feel about all the stuff you're doing now, your dad?
Yeah, he loves it. He loves. Obviously Trevor was his hero, and whenever I go back to his thing, all we do is talk hairdressing. It gets on my brother's nerves. Because whenever we go out for a beer, it just ends up being a hairdressing chat. And I'll show him my images, and he's very, very honest and very blunt. He will be, I'll show him something, and he'll be like, I don't like that. And then I think, does he not like it, or does he not get it? So sometimes...
What has he not liked? Tell me what he hasn't liked.
What did he not like? He didn't like that geometric knot. The one that, not the samurai one, the one at the back.
That's one of my favourite images of all time.
Yeah, he just
But it doesn't matter.
he didn't like that the knot was all messy at the back, and I was like, no, but it's supposed to be that. It's supposed to be quite a raw editorial thing. He was like, looks like you don't know how to do a ponytail. I was like, okay.
Well, just before we go, Tom, and this has been, we could speak all night. I really
I enjoyed it, mate. I enjoyed it.
For me, one of the great things about when I speak to brilliant hairdressers, Dove included, and next week we've got Nick Irwin coming here, is they're nearly embarrassed to talk about their craft in the way that other people talk about that. Do you think there'll ever come a time where you'll be able to recognize the things that you've done as being real landmark eras in hairdressing, or do you think it'll always be a case of where it's just work?
For me personally,
yeah.
I don't know. I really like some of the stuff I've done, really, but I think you don't want to like fall in love with your work too much, because then I think that's when you can take the foot off the gas. So it's one of them. You're never as good as you say you are, and you're never as bad as they say you are. You just got to just keep cracking on, I think.
I don't think I've ever met a hairdresser quite as modest as you, but this is definitely a first for me. And also, I'm sure Trevor Sorby looks back at the wedge and goes, I was good there.
Yeah, I'm sure he's back the wedge. I'm sure that is, I'm sure.
If you had to leave a legacy, and I hate putting you in the spot, but if you had to leave a legacy, what would it be?
I suppose that like every single thing that I did, I went 100%. I never watered anything down. I never let people sway my opinion or try and hold me back. It's always 100% what I think is right and what I want to do. And if it works and it's good, then great. And if it doesn't, then at least I give it 100%.
There was a lot of questions come in tonight while we were talking, but I ignored them all because I had too many questions to ask myself. But one of the questions that was asked, and I always think it's interesting, if you couldn't hairdress anymore, what else would you do?
Probably be a chef.
Oh, really?
I really like cooking, and I find watching certain Michelin star chef documentaries very interesting. I love their approach.
Well, listen, Tom, it's been an absolute pleasure tonight. We're out of time. Thank you very much. Good luck in your new role.
Thanks a lot. I really appreciate it, mate. Thank you for the invite.
I tell you how much of an inspiration you've been to all of us, and we love your work. Keep it up, and I'll see you in the future.
You will do. Cheers, mate. Thanks a lot.
Cheers.
See you soon. Bye.